Atmospheric Thermodynamics 3.1 Gas Laws. I am Associate Professor Yusup, from the School of Industrial Technology, University, Sains, Malaysia. The outline of this video is as follows. We will discuss the ideal gas equation and its various forms, which are fundamental to understanding the behavior of gases in our atmosphere. We will start by revisiting some foundational principles you might remember from chemistry, namely Boyle's law and Charles's law. Then we will dive into the kinetic theory of gases to get a better feel for what is happening at the molecular level. With that foundation, we will see how to apply these laws specifically to atmospheric gases, looking at both dry air and water vapor, which is a very important component. This will naturally lead us to Dalton's law of partial pressures, which helps us handle mixtures of gases like the air we breathe. Finally, we will wrap up by introducing a really clever and useful concept in meteorology called virtual temperature, which simplifies our calculations when dealing with moist air. To begin our journey into atmospheric thermodynamics, we need a way to describe the state of a gas. We do this using what is called an equation of state. This is essentially a rule or formula that connects three key properties of a material: its pressure, its volume, and its temperature. Now, the great news for us as atmospheric scientists is that for most situations, the gases that make up our atmosphere behave very predictably. We can assume that they follow a specific rule called the ideal gas equation. This is a foundational concept for us as it provides a powerful yet straightforward tool for understanding the physical behavior of the atmosphere. Using this equation, we can analyze everything from individual gases to the complex mixture we call air, making it essential for the topics we will cover next. We will begin with one of the most fundamental relationships in atmospheric science, the ideal gas equation. We express this relationship as P times V equals M times R times T. So what do these variables represent? Well, PD stands for pressure, which we measure in pascals. V is the volume of the gas in cubic meters, and M is its mass in kilograms. The T represents absolute temperature, and it is crucial to remember that we must use the Kelvin scale for this equation to work correctly. Finally, we have R, which is the specific gas constant. The word specific here is very important because the value of R actually changes depending on the particular gas we are examining. For instance, the R value for dry air is different from the R for helium or for pure water vapor. This powerful equation forms our cornerstone for understanding how the state variables of a gas, its pressure, volume, and temperature, are all interconnected. The ideal gas equation we have been using, PV equals mRT, is not the only way to write it. We can rearrange it into forms that are often more convenient for atmospheric science. First, let us consider density. Since density, which we represent with the Greek letter rho, is simply mass per unit volume, we can substitute it into the equation. This gives us a very tidy version, P equals rho times R times T. This form is incredibly handy because we frequently talk about the density of air parcels as they rise and sink in the atmosphere. Another useful form involves specific volume, represented by the Greek letter alpha. Specific volume is the inverse of density. It is the volume occupied by a unit mass, like 1 kilogram, of a gas. So the equation becomes P times alpha equals R times T. Both of these versions are just different ways of looking at the same fundamental relationship between pressure, temperature, and how much stuff is in a given space. The ideal gas equation is a powerful tool, but it is actually a combination of three fundamental relationships that were discovered earlier. First, we have Boyle's law. This law describes what we call an isothermal process, which is just a fancy way of saying the temperature is held constant. In this case, the volume of a gas is inversely proportional to its pressure. So if you increase the pressure on a gas, its volume will decrease and vice versa. Next are two laws from Jacques Charles, both involving temperature. His first law states that if you keep the pressure constant, the volume is directly proportional to the absolute temperature. Heat a gas and it expands. Cool it down and it contracts. Charles's second law is very similar. If the volume is held constant, the pressure is directly proportional to the absolute temperature. This is why you should never leave an aerosol can in a hot car. As the temperature rises, the pressure inside builds up significantly. So how do we connect the macroscopic properties we measure, like pressure and temperature, to what is happening at the microscopic level? That is where the kinetic theory of gases comes in. It asks us to picture a gas as a huge assembly of identical particles, either atoms or molecules, all moving around in completely random directions. Now, there are a few key assumptions. We imagine these particles are incredibly small and that when they collide with each other or the container walls, the collisions are perfectly elastic. This means they bounce off without any loss of kinetic energy, like perfect superballs. Here is the most important connection. The average kinetic energy of all these moving particles is directly proportional to the gas's absolute temperature. So a higher temperature simply means the molecules are, on average, moving faster. The analogy on the slide is perfect. The pressure on the container's walls is just the result of the constant collective force from all of these countless tiny collisions. More energy means faster particles, which leads to harder and more frequent collisions and therefore higher pressure. To get a more intuitive feel for the gas laws, let us think about a simple analogy involving a handball court. Imagine the gas molecules are like elastic balls bouncing around inside, and their speed represents the gas temperature. For Boyle's law, if we increase the court's volume while the ball's speed remains constant, the balls will naturally hit the walls less frequently. This leads to a decrease in the total force exerted on the walls, which we measure as pressure. Now, for Charles's second law, suppose we keep the court size fixed but increase the speed of the balls. They will not only collide with the walls more often, but each collision will also be more forceful. This combination of more frequent and harder impacts causes the overall pressure to increase. This analogy also helps with Charles's first law, so here is a question. To keep the pressure constant as you increase the temperature, what must happen to the volume? So how can we make the ideal gas law more universal, so it applies to any gas without needing a specific gas constant for each one? The key here is the concept of a mole. A mole is simply the molecular weight of a substance expressed in grams. The brilliant part is that 1 mole of any substance, whether it is oxygen, nitrogen, or argon, contains the exact same number of molecules. This universal quantity is known as Avogadro's number, which is approximately 6.022 times 10 to the power of 23 molecules per mole. That is an incredibly large number. Now, because 1 mole of any ideal gas contains the same number of molecules, the gas constant for 1 mole will also be the same for all of them. We call this the universal gas constant, written as R star, which has a value of 8.3145 joules per Kelvin per mole. When we think about gases in terms of moles, the ideal gas law becomes much more universal. Instead of a gas constant that changes for every different gas, we can use the universal gas constant R star. The equation becomes P times V equals N times R star times T, where N is the number of moles. This is incredibly convenient because R star is the same for all gases. Now, what if we zoom in even further, down to the level of a single molecule? We can do that too. We define a new constant, Boltzmann's constant, represented by K. We find K by taking the universal gas constant, R star, and dividing it by Avogadro's number. Its value is tiny, about 1.38 times 10 to the power of negative 23 joules per Kelvin. This allows us to write the ideal gas law in another powerful form. P equals N sub 0 times K times T. Here in sub 0 is the number of molecules per unit volume. So you see, these equations provide a beautiful link between the macroscopic world we observe and the microscopic behavior of molecules. Now we know that dry air is not a single gas, right? It is a mixture of nitrogen, oxygen, argon, and other trace gases. So instead of dealing with each one separately, we can treat the mixture as if it were a single gas by defining an apparent molecular weight. For dry air, this value, which we call M sub D, is about 28.97 grams per mole. This is essentially a weighted average of all the gases in the air. Using this value, we can then calculate a specific gas constant just for dry air, which we denote as R sub d. The calculation is straightforward. We take the universal gas constant, R star, and divide it by the apparent molecular weight. The result is a number you will see again and again, 287 joules per Kelvin per kilogram. This allows us to write a very convenient form of the ideal gas equation specifically for dry air. P sub d equals Rho sub d times R sub d times T. Alright, we have just determined the gas constant for dry air, so now let us apply that same logic to water vapor. Water vapor is, of course, a hugely important component of our atmosphere. The molecular weight of a water molecule, which we will call m sub W, is about 18.016 grams per mole. To find the specific gas constant for water vapor, or R sub V, we take the universal gas constant R star, multiply it by 1000 to convert to kilograms, and then divide by the molecular weight of water. This gives us a value of 461.5 joules per Kelvin per kilogram. Now notice something interesting here. The value for R sub V is significantly larger than R sub D for dry air. This is because water molecules are much lighter than the average molecule of dry air. This difference gives rise to a very useful constant epsilon, which is the ratio of the gas constants, or equivalently, the molecular weights. Epsilon is approximately 0.622, and we will see this number pop up quite often. So far, we have treated air as a single gas, but in reality, it is a mixture. The air in our atmosphere is primarily a mix of what we call dry air, which is mostly nitrogen and oxygen, and water vapor. So how do we calculate the pressure for a mixture like this? Thankfully, John Dalton gave us a straightforward principle. Dalton's law of partial pressure states that for a mixture of gases, the total pressure is simply the sum of the pressures that each individual gas would exert if it were all alone in that same volume. You just add them up. In general terms, the total pressure is equal to the pressure of gas 1 plus the pressure of gas 2, and so on for all the gases in the mixture. For our purposes with moist air, this simplifies beautifully. The total atmospheric pressure, which we label P, is the sum of the partial pressure of dry air, Pi sub d, and the partial pressure of water vapor, which we uniquely label as E. This simple equation, P equals P sub d plus E, is fundamental for almost everything we will do moving forward. We encounter a practical inconvenience when dealing with moist air. The gas constant for moist air depends on its water vapor content, which is highly variable in the atmosphere. This makes calculations quite cumbersome. So, we use a clever workaround. We can retain the constant we know for dry air R sub d, and instead use a fictitious temperature called the virtual temperature, or T sub V. The formal definition is that virtual temperature is the temperature that completely dry air would need to have in order to have the same density as a parcel of moist air at the same pressure. Because water vapor molecules are lighter than the nitrogen and oxygen molecules they displace in the air, moist air is actually less dense than dry air. Therefore, to make dry air match this lower density, we would have to heat it. This is why the virtual temperature is always slightly greater than the actual air temperature, though often just by a few degrees. So how do we handle the ideal gas law for moist air without having to constantly change our gas constant? We use a very clever concept called virtual temperature. By using the virtual temperature, which we call T sub V, we can write a simple and practical version of the ideal gas law for moist air. It looks very familiar. Pressure equals density times R sub d times T sub V. Notice we are using R sub d, the gas constant for dry air. That is the key. Now, how do we find this virtual temperature? We can calculate it from the actual temperature, T, and the partial pressure of water vapor, which is E. The formula is T sub V equals T divided by the quantity, 1 minus the ratio of E to P, all multiplied by 1 minus epsilon, where epsilon is a constant approximately equal to 0.622. The main takeaway here is that virtual temperature elegantly accounts for the density reducing effect of water vapor. It let us use a single convenient gas constant for all our atmospheric calculations. Atmospheric gases for almost all our purposes can be described very accurately by the ideal gas equation. You will see it in a couple of forms, such as P times V equals m times r times t, or P equals RO times r times t, where RRO is the density. This powerful equation is not something that just appeared out of thin air. It is built on the foundational principles discovered by scientists like Boyle and Charles. They established the core relationships between pressure, volume, and temperature for a gas. To understand this on a molecular level, the kinetic theory of gases provides a microscopic view. It explains these behaviors by picturing gas as a collection of tiny, randomly moving particles whose average kinetic energy defines the temperature. Now, the R in the equation, the specific gas constant, is not a single value for all gases. Its value depends on the molecular weight, which is why we use R sub d for dry air and R sub v for water vapor. This leads us to the very useful concept of virtual temperature, T sub v, which allows us to apply the dry air gas constant to moist air by correcting for its lower density. To wrap up, let us consider a couple of thought-provoking questions. We have established that moist air is less dense than dry air at the same temperature and pressure, so how does this play out in the real atmosphere? Think about it. If a parcel of air is less dense than its surroundings, it will want to rise. This is a fundamental trigger for convection, the upward motion of air that can lead to cloud formation and thunderstorms. A humid air mass is essentially more buoyant, giving it a head start for rising. Now, for our second point, the ideal gas law. We rely on it heavily, but it is an approximation. When might it break down? The law assumes gas particles have no volume and do not interact. Under extremely high pressures, particles are squeezed so close that their own volume becomes significant. At T very low temperatures, their slow movement allows intermolecular forces to take hold. While we do not typically see these conditions in our troposphere, it is crucial to remember the limits of our models.